I'm so honored to have here Elises. She is the host of Sacred Guidance with Stella Muse podcast, and she combines the ancient wisdom of Raja Yoga, Tantra, and the esoteric. She is featured on various national and international platforms, including SBS, World News, Mind Body Green, Mamma Mia, The Sunday Times, and Daily Mail UK. She is also a Reiki master, a Tantra practitioner, and a writer, a speaker, a model, and an artist. Welcome to the show, Elises.
Thanks, lovely lady. It's a pleasure to be here. I feel with joy to be joining you and all these wonderful people that you brought together to bring some light to a place of darkness, and we all need that.
Oh yes, especially now in these very potent times that we are facing, right? I know that you're coming from Australia and there's fire raging there right now.
Absolutely. It's interesting, isn't it? You know, even us as the feminine, we understand these kind of things when we're ignored or suppressed or mistreated or traumatized in any way. We are going to react and respond eventually, and we do that in different ways. And some of us, we internalize it. It seems like Mother Earth is no longer internalizing it. She's speaking out and she needs help, and we all need to learn to reach out and ask for help. So that's why it's so important we're here today to offer that help and guidance for those women who, like you and I, have been in places where it's been really difficult and challenging, but we don't have to do it alone, which is really quite special.
Right, yeah, and thank you for all the beautiful work you're doing. Can you speak a little bit more about Stella Muse and what it stands for?
Absolutely. Stella Muse was originally going to be an online magazine. So Stella meaning star and muse being like an artist's muse, a source of inspiration. So it's like having that light of inspiration in our life. And with all my pieces of paper along the way, I needed to bring it together to actually offer something tangible and of service. So I started having an online practice, and I started the podcast and helping women, men and couples all around the world, from issues with the physical body or sexual issues to those of heart, relationships, those of the mind. Hence the Sacred Guidance, which is like psychology for the soul. So I take a very holistic approach, looking at the whole, but I definitely take a combination of ancient, like Eastern wisdom, really, and then modern science. I think there's a beauty in harmonizing both, just like there's a beauty in harmonizing the masculine and feminine within us. So all that kind of combined, I guess, I bring to the table and go in depth in all different areas, obviously in the podcast, and then the sessions I do with people, where that is the Sacred Guidance kind of psychology style, or the Tantra, or the healing. They're all just doors really that lead to the same place. Just depends what speaks to who when they come to me. And when they come to me, I say that is, you know, anywhere. I've got clients in different cities around the world, whether that's in Europe or the States or Canada, and then people who are in Australia, or some that can't have private practice in person here in Melbourne. So I love reaching different people in different cultures, because while we're experiencing different versions of reality, we all can relate on those kind of fundamental principles, I suppose, whether they're human or spiritual. And there's something, I guess, humbling in that. We actually really can reach each other no matter where we are, where we come from, how we identify, what we've experienced in life. So my aim is, like we touched on before, to help people physically, emotionally, mentally, and beyond that, whether you call that spiritually or consciously, and help us align ourselves to that true nature so we can be the most harmonized and bright version of us, no matter what trauma or past challenges we've been through.
Right. And when you say align, can you speak more into that? How do you see alignment?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say in this modern world, we focus heavily on certain parts of ourselves. Like, let's say physically, there's a lot of focus on the way a woman should look, her size, the clothes she should wear, how she should present herself, what not to wear. All these kind of things put a lot of focus on the physical, and whether that's a woman who's in puberty, whether that's a woman who is pregnant, there's this extreme pressure to be a certain way, and it's often unrealistic. And as you touched on, I've been doing modelling since the age of 7. I'm 35. I've been in this world for a very long time. I don't do it full time anymore. And I learn a lot of things in that world, and understanding how skewed these fake and unrealistic expectations are. And it can really affect people, and they can take that on board. For some, it's becoming very extreme. They are affected with their eating, their exercise, not leaving the house because they haven't kind of got themselves ready. Or maybe look at the other extreme where they're deciding Botox is the only answer for them. So we can be out of alignment physically, but then we can also be out of alignment emotionally. If maybe we've just surfaced, kind of smooth things out on top, and we think we've done a bit of work, maybe we've seen someone for a session here and there, or done a healing, and we think our trauma is now kind of removed or fixed, but it's most likely not. As you probably experience yourself, like trauma can run quite deep, and we can't just fix it like that. It takes big work, it takes dedication and commitment, it takes the right kind of person who we have a rapport with. So I'd say that can be easily out of kilter too. And the mind I look at, I guess, as really the governor besides our soul, if you want to go that deep. But a lot of things happen in our thoughts. If our thoughts aren't in harmony, aren't finding a place of peace, or aren't able to connect to something that's real and true, if they're too swayed or influenced by propaganda or the media or people who aren't healthy in our lives, sometimes even family or relationships, that then kind of trickles into our emotions, making them uneven. And then that can flow into our body and the choices we make. So to me, when these three, I look at them as three vehicles that kind of make this form of us, if they're not in a harmony, in some kind of equal balance, not too far one way, not too far the other, we aren't functioning optimally. And I'd like to think when we are more in harmony, then that consciousness, that spirit, guidance, whatever you want to call it, your soul, God, whatever it is that you label it, can work through your mind, can work through your heart in your expression of feelings, and can work through your physical body, your behavior, how you show up in the world, what you do in the world. So it's big work, but we can do it. It's just baby steps. And I look at that as kind of a work of a lifetime in some ways for some of us.
Right.
Yeah, if that answers your question.
Yes, so beautifully. Thank you for that beautiful explanation. And it feels like healing takes it's almost like a spiral, right? So you kind of you do a certain part of it, and you elevate yourself, and then you look at it from another higher dimension, and the journey itself, that's actually where you initiated into your power, is by taking on that journey to heal and align and expand and rise in your consciousness.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like you said with that spiral, I look at life like that. So let's say we've done part of our healing and we take another turn of the spiral, and then it's almost like we're reflecting kind of where we were. We've done a bit of work and now we're kind of above that. I think at times it can be like that snakes and ladders game. I'm not sure if you've ever played that, but sometimes if you haven't done the work, you can tumble back down to where you were. But when you've done the work and then you sustain that and build on top of it, I think then you can continue along that spiral. But it's not necessarily, I guess, even or done at a certain time. We can have times where we do slip back, and other times when we're challenged. Like maybe we think we've really done this, we've nailed it, and then the universe or God or whatever says, are you sure about that? Here's a challenge of a lifetime in the form of a relationship, or something happens at work, or maybe your trauma's brought to the surface again and you're put in a position where you don't know what to do, perhaps. You don't know how to process the emotions that come up with that. So we get tested and challenged a lot along the way. It's how we grow, right? We're in the school of life after all. So I love that spiral, and I use that analogy a lot. I think it's really valuable for us to kind of picture and imagine ourselves doing that, knowing that it's not just from A to B. There's this beautiful, incredibly enriching journey that we go on, and the journey is the reward, right? As that proverb tells us. But it is work. There's no denying that. I know most people don't want to hear that, but that work, as challenging as it can be, can also be extremely beautiful. So there we've got that harmony, that duality and balance again there.
Right. I agree. It takes, first of all, it takes a choice, right? To make that conscious choice that there is another way, and whether I want to go on that path or just stay in ignorance. That's the first choice. It comes from there. Yeah,
I agree entirely. Ignorance is bliss for some of us.
Right. And then with that choice, once you made the choice, it's almost like, you're ready, the teacher is coming, and all the right events and people and circumstances start to navigate themselves into your life, and you start to have that relationship, right?
Yeah, definitely. They say, you know, when the student's ready, the teacher appears, but sometimes I think it's the other way around. When the teacher is ready, because they've got to be ready in a position to teach. They have to be an authentic teacher, right, to help. Sometimes I think it's like when the teacher's ready, then the students come. So don't think that you have to wait around for a teacher. Sometimes when you're in that right place, they're probably getting themselves sorted out, and then you can unite.
Yeah, and there is so many resources out there today, which is so beautiful. Because I remember that when I started my journey over 2 decades ago, it wasn't as accessible as it is now. There was no social media.
Yeah.
The internet was not so interconnected, and I think even the level of consciousness was not as potent as it is at this point in time.
Yeah. I think, you know, even back when you think of like the 60s and movements kind of like that, there was an element of more mystical spirituality, you know, and the free love. It was all very heart-based, very kind of bhakti style, if we think of yoga. But I feel now in this modern time where we're mixing like the power of modern science with that ancient wisdom, we're starting to understand we need both. And that this technology that can also be misused can also be used for greatness, to bring us together, to help us find the right people that we want to connect with, who can serve us and we can serve them. So there's a beauty in that as well. So once again, it's that kind of heart-mind connection, I think, coming into play.
Right. I think this whole summit and all the experts that are on this amazing panel, they all bring that mix of the Eastern and the Western. And I think that's really where we are at now. One needs the other, and it is, as you said, like the feminine and the masculine. They both have their ways, and it's time to merge them together for the greatest good of humanity.
Absolutely. And that starts within us too, because even we learn, you know, in the tantras that the symbolism of masculine and feminine is actually found within us. We have that, you know, kind of cool, calm water of the feminine that can also be wild and crazy and can be like, you know, tepid and all like serene. And then we have that fire of the masculine that can just spark up at any point. And if we're not in balance, that can be, you know, controlling us. Those emotions and that anger or that rage or the jealousy or whatever can really control everything. Our actions, our feelings, our thoughts. But when we're in harmony and we find that masculine feminine balance within us, we start being a balanced being, really. But that also means we have to process everything that kind of led us to this point to be in balance.
Yeah, that's exactly the work, is looking at everything, feeling everything, going through that motion of emotion, right? Because it's an energy emotion, and cultivating again and again that self-forgiveness, self-compassion, self-love.
Yeah. I'd say when we look at the journey of love, it does start with the self in some ways, because if we can't find love within our own heart for ourselves, for our journey, for our experiences, we often find it hard to find it, I guess, in a way to give to others or to share or exchange with others. Not the same for everyone. Some people find it easier to give and they find it harder to receive, but often that's where we need to start, is finding that love within ourselves and connecting in that space. And that self-love is so important, because that helps us then to lead to, you know, romantic love or relationship love, which then kind of can spring us into sacred love, to spiritual and soul and divine love, which is really where we want to be. We don't just want to stay in self-love, because that can become selfish if it gets out of balance, right? We can become quite self-absorbed and self-focused and kind of probably a little bit cut off from giving and sharing and being part of community and humanity. So like anything, we have to find the balance, but to start in that place is really beautiful and extremely needed, especially if we've been, you know, deprived of love in our life, we've been neglected, or if we have been abused or hurt, or there's been a disconnect, especially in our childhood or in a pivotal relationship in our life. We need that. We need to create safe spaces and boundaries and use our discernment to make wise choices, all these kind of things to support that self-love. Because self-love includes the mind. Hence why I use the word discernment, to make those right choices for you, of whether you should go out, whether you should see that person, whether you can say no or yes, and stand in your truth, honouring what's right for you. That's super important. Just as much as I'm going to stay and have a bath tonight, or I'm going to cozy up with a cup of tea and read a book, that kind of self-care can be self-love as well. But we need to see the spectrum of self-love to make sure we really are taking good care of ourselves physically, emotionally, and mentally. And also with physically comes sexually too, right?
Right. It's almost as if we fill our own cup until it overflows, then the inner love just overflows naturally and wants to give itself and wants to share itself. But when the cup is empty, there's nothing to give. Then the giving is more out of resentment, or can create resentment, but it's out of nothing really. So,
absolutely. I say that with my clients.
Yeah.
Like as if they're like watering cans, trying to water all the roses in the garden. And if they're empty because they haven't paused and let the rain fill them up, like you said, they are going to become resentful to their beloved, or, snap or get angry at the children, or not be able to focus at work, and they're easily kind of ruffled, or they've got short temper or even short attention span. So yeah, you're right. We need to fill up our own cup, and then make sure when we do, that then we go out and serve. I think sometimes that's the bit that's not always mentioned. We kind of go, fill up my cup, I'm great, that's fine. It's like, no, that's the first bit. Now with all that beauty that's within you that wants to be shared, go out and share it.
Yeah.
In whatever capacity that is, because we're all here to serve. It's just what that looks like. You might be in a position where you're a nurse, or you're a parent, or maybe you're just in a position where you can smile at strangers on the street, or donate some money, or volunteer, or just make wiser choices in life to help the global humanity, whatever that is. So all of this comes back to that self-love on those levels, which is quite remarkable how one tiny little act of kindness for ourselves can lead to so much. Shows how powerful love can be, right? But I guess as the glue of the universe or the cosmos, that's what you're going to get with love. It's the most powerful force that we know.
Right. Yes, exactly. And another important message that I want to convey is that I feel that when I really found self-compassion and self-forgiveness, and I stopped criticizing and judging myself, naturally I stopped criticizing and judging the other, and I had more compassion and forgiveness for the other. So this is again how I see us going from within to without, right? We first experiencing all of that within our being, and then it's naturally, or the next step is to offer it to the others.
Absolutely. And it's a gift that keeps on giving, isn't it? Because it's a gift we give to ourselves, and that's a gift that we get to pass forward. And I think when you kind of mentioned that about not criticizing and judging yourself, it just makes me think of some of like the fundamental spiritual, even Buddhist principles, like non-judgment and humility, like keeping humble, knowing that we're all students here on this path, whatever that path is for you, and loving kindness and compassion. And these are such kind of base, baby paddle pool principles or values, whatever you want to call them, but they can be easily dropped and forgotten about sometimes when the emotions are crazy or the mind's going crazy. So even just holding on to one of those and starting with that, if you find yourself, being really judgmental and maybe projecting that onto other people, or maybe it's yourself and that horrible critical internal dialogue, or just not being kind or not having compassion for what someone else is going through, or maybe where you're at right now because something's come up for you and you're in deep pain and you just kind of don't know what to do with yourself. Having compassion in those times sounds, I guess, easy in some ways, and it's not necessarily. It's simple, it's logical, but it isn't always easy. And that's why having the strength or the courage, I love the word courage for the record, it's like, from the French word cœur, meaning heart. So you have to have heart to have courage. But having the courage to, reach out and ask a beloved, a trusted friend, a professional practitioner for help sometimes at these points, just to get you on your way, to kind of lift you up again, and maybe sometimes work with those simple primal things like compassion or loving kindness or humility or non-judgment can get you back on your path. So you can then continue on your spiral again, like we touched on before.
Right. Because you never actually stand still. You either progressing, raising up, or you kind of spiraling down.
Digress.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
in one point, and then it's almost a moment to moment decision. Where do you want to spiral, up or down? You know, and that really affected by your actions, by your thoughts, by your deeds.
So much so. And that's the thing. I mean, everything's energy. Science tells us that, not just the spiritual world, right? So we are never stagnant. We're never still. That's what's so fascinating. Sometimes we feel like we are. We feel like we're stagnated. We feel like we're stuck, but we're not. Because as you said before, we use the word choice, right? We always have a choice. It doesn't mean the choice is easy. Often it's really freaking hard to say yes or to say no or to go not yet or okay, tonight. Whatever it is, we have to make a choice if we are going to take control of what we can control and learn to flow with what we can't. Because in life, there's controllables and there's non-controllables. And we've got to know which battles to pick, right? We can't fight tidal waves on our own. It just doesn't work like that.
I think it's the constant fine dance between the dichotomy, right? Between the polarity of the opposites. You know, the part that you have to surrender because life is happening, and you can't, you have to let it flow through as it flows, and then there's so much control that you also have in so many moments, the way you react, the way you respond, the choices that you take. So it's always that fine dance, I find.
And that's a beautiful analogy. It really is a dance, isn't it? You know, and like you said, if we're going to kind of like lean in and flow with that, or if we're going to try and fight and resist it, it's a tricky one. And I love how you also said, you know, respond and react, because that's our choice too. We can respond to something from a place of, to me, that's harmony, equilibrium. We've taken a pause, we've processed it, we've sat with it, we're going to respond. Our reaction is like that immediate outburst, like defending ourselves or attacking or projecting. It's an interesting one, but once again, we have a choice. It's good to check in and just ask yourself, what do I do more often? What makes me react when I react, or what makes me respond? Because sometimes if there's trauma and we're triggered, we sometimes can lean more to that reaction. Even if it's a reaction inside ourselves that kind of hurts us, or it can be a reaction and we project that outwards. But that's another one to be aware of also on this path to healing, really, in our journey of life.
Right. It's almost coming from the reptilian brain. It's almost like an automatic
primal.
Yeah, you know, that is a response to the freeze or flight or fly response, right? So it's
absolutely, because we're in fear mode and we think we need to defend ourselves, and we react in different ways. Some people run, some people freeze, they don't know how to defend themselves, some people internalize. And any of those may or may not be the right move at that time, but that's often how we react if we are put in a place of fear. That's why ideally if we make those conscious, wise choices best we can to control what we can, we're ideally more so in a position to respond. And then we don't have our central nervous system fired up, and we don't have all that angst and that stress in our physical body, you know, to also affect our emotional body as well.
Right, and it's almost like pulling in the inner resources that needs to be filled, not in a crisis mode, but rather when we cultivating it on a daily basis. I strongly believe in a daily practice, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes, but that commitment and that cultivation is really what fills in the inner resources.
Absolutely. And I share with my clients too, having some kind of practice, whatever it is for you, because we're all at different stages of our path. Some of us take a conscious or a spiritual path, some of us are a bit more pragmatic and we just want to fit it into our really busy schedule. It's totally cool, wherever you're at, whatever you need. But having some kind of non-negotiable time, as I call it, can really help set us up for the day. And whether that for you is just a mindful cup of tea, not looking at your phone, just being present in that, so it's a mindfulness practice, or maybe it is some kind of a relaxation practice, or maybe it is more of a proper meditative practice where you hold that point of tension and really seek to have some kind of connection with something higher and greater. However it looks for you, it might be even going for a walk in nature, but something that's non-negotiable, and for you, once again, to fill up your cup So you're in a better place to respond, not react, to help work through whatever comes up for you if you're triggered or there's a trauma that arises, and then go out to the world and serve the best way you can. So these kind of things, they all seem to come back to something so simple, but they have this beautiful kind of domino or ripple effect, how we then can really impact our environment. That's the beauty of a conscious path, I think, or a spiritual, tantric, Buddhist, esoteric, whatever you want to call it, is that we don't just influence and impact ourselves. We can have influence and impact on others in a positive way, to bring, more light to darkness, to bring more joy, however you want to term it, more consciousness, more awareness.
Right. And always ask yourself what love would do now, because that's a nice reference point, right?
That is beautiful. Yeah. And even I remember one of my girlfriends for my 30th birthday got me a t-shirt that said, what would Elise do now? As if like it was, the highest version of me, like that cool, calm, collected. And there's been sometimes I'll be like, that Elise that you show the world, like who you really are, how would she respond right now? So even just checking with yourself, because you are love. You are light, essentially. You're this soul having this human experience. So what would that greatest version of you do right now? I love that. So same kind of premise, but making it a bit more personal, I suppose.
Right. And this is the connection to the divine, is through our own body, being, mind, soul, heart. This is the connection. We don't need to find it anywhere else. The connection is right from within. Right.
Yeah, I love that. And that's kind of what we've missed. We talk about alignment sometimes when we're trying to seek some kind of alignment, sometimes a kind of a connection, we seek outside ourselves. Sometimes we'll look for that in sex or in a relationship or in food or in buying things or grabbing, drugs, alcohol, whatever it is. And instead of externalizing this, we need to internalize this and know that what we need is actually within us. There are things that can inspire us and there's things that can help us, but essentially unless we're prepared to step up, show up and make those changes, do some kind of work, get rid of some habits that don't serve us, work through our pain and our trauma, have better relationships that are going to nourish us, nothing's going to balance out and be harmonized, and we're constantly going to stay in kind of a personality space, I call this. In, I guess, orthodox or traditional psychology, they talk about the ego. In esoteric psychology that I practice and study, we talk about this being your personality nature. So those three lower vehicles I touched on, like your mind in the chitter-chatter, your emotions when they're wild, and your physical behaviors, your actions and addictions and habits, all those kind of things. These three bodies are kind of like combined to be your personality nature. And for most people, it controls them, like we touched on. So if we can work through those and help balance that out, then and only then are we going to be closer connected to consciousness, to divinity, to the love that we are, because we're kind of creating a clearer channel within ourselves for that consciousness to work through us. And that's really what we're seeking, because that's real. That essence is nothing that can be bought, it can't be replaced, and it can't be taken from us. We get so kind of caught up with stuff and this physical meat suit that ages and is meant to decompose and die, that we forget what's real in the world, connection and helping each other and doing that from a place of love. So we should really be aware if we're getting caught up in any capacity with our physical behaviors and patterns and actions, reactions, more to the point, our emotions and our moods and our thoughts and that chitter chatter. And seek help with that. We kind of do need help, psychologically and emotionally and spiritually, kind of all combined. I look forward to that day when, East and West is truly combined, and, Western medicine and the ageless wisdom that we have in so many different parts of the world understand they need to work together. Until then, we have to do that work ourselves, right?
Right.
And that's the path to healing, as far as I've witnessed it and experienced it with all the people that I've worked with.
Yes, me too. Absolutely. And you've been talking about personality, and so much of it is not even our true self. It's what we acquired from society, from parents, from teachers, from media, from, so it's really to go through that process of dismantling all that wiring that happened, and we sometimes not aware that it's not actually belong to us, and it's not resonance with our true self. It doesn't actually sits well in the body, but we taking it on.
For sure. It's not us at all. That's the irony, right? Because we're not our body, we're not our emotions, we're not our thoughts. We're, let's just say for the sake of a term, we're a soul having a human experience, or we're love working through a body. It's kind of like divinity working through matter, or spirit and matter, or, father and mother. When you think of like, Father God or Father Universe and Mother Matter, we're trying to merge these, and it's our soul, or that life force, that spark that animates us. When we die, it's gone. We're just a body. It's that bridges the two. So if we're kind of clogged up with bad habits that don't serve us, with unprocessed trauma and hurt and pain and anger and thoughts that kind of all connect with that, it's kind of like all this muck within us that blocks up the channel that this body is. The physical body is a channel, right? So it can't work through us, whatever you want to call it. But that bridge to divinity, that bridge to our real self, just spirit, it doesn't kind of connect with us, because our soul, that light force, that spark, prana, chi, whatever you want to call it, can't work through us and actually animate us, bring us to life, to who we really are, but it's a long road to get there. We're still so caught up in what to wear, how we feel when that person cuts us off in traffic, the pressure and the tension of getting this next little bit of our work out into the world. And we get so caught up in this illusion, the matrix-like kind of experience of life, that it takes us off our true path, and we get stuck in a fog of, we call it glamour in the esoteric language, and illusion. And it is like a deep fog, and you can't tell what's real, what's a mirage, what's a shell of something that used to exist, and what's actual truth. Only light leads us to truth. So however we can, we need to find our way to the light, create space for light to work through us, so that we don't just then go off on our own spiritual journey and leave everyone behind thinking, on my way to enlightenment now. We turn around and go back into the darkness and shine our light to help others. So we find our way, and then we serve. That to me is, part of the purpose for our existence here, is helping each other grow and evolve as well. And I'm sure you've experienced that, like when we've gone through trauma. And I come from a history in sexual abuse, and definitely from, neglect and those kind of things, and abandonment, even if it's psychological or emotional. It doesn't have to be physical, right? We can experience these in different levels. And understanding that, working through that, then gives you more empathy and compassion, more awareness of other people's pain and the suffering of the world. But you don't just process that yourself and get to a good place. You then use that in whatever way you can to help other people who are maybe just a step behind you or 1,000 steps behind you. And that to me is part of the gift of going through any trauma. And I've worked with women who have been abducted, abused, gone through gang rape, you name it. Some women, who've had to have abortions because of it, or been beaten by their partners, not loved by their parents, forgotten at school for hours until it's nighttime, all different things. And these people that I've worked with are now thriving in their own way, whether it's through being parents in the world, whether it's through a practice that they create, whether it's through writing a book, whether it's through speaking and activism. We can all find lightness in the dark, but that's our choice. Once again, not an easy choice, and no way does that happen overnight. For some of us, it takes a very long time, years, to actually acknowledge what happened, that it's not okay, that it wasn't our fault, that we did all we could, all those factors that come into it, right? And then be in a position to go, I actually have done my work. I am in a place of peace or acceptance or healing, and I now want to turn my experience into a gift for someone else. And that to me that can be, I guess, joy that comes from deep pain or trauma or hurt, I suppose. I think Eve Onsler is a great example of that. I'm not sure if you've heard of her. She's the one that wrote very famous kind of world-renowned play called The Vagina Monologues years ago. And she just put out a book, which I think is in like now the top 20 list for I think 2019, speaking about the abuse that she lived through with her father. And she kind of wrote this letter to him in the form of a book, even though he's deceased now, of kind of what she would have said, I suppose. And it's incredibly powerful. And her activism and her art of creating things like Vagina Monologues and now, you know, her book, that's a way of turning pain into a service that's now reaching women all around the world. And we don't have to do it on that scale. It's just one example. And if women haven't heard of this lady, Eve Onslow, then look her up. She's on social media and you can find her work in many places. It's just a beautiful example of how we as women can help each other and come together and create beauty, create art, create connection, create community through pain, I suppose, and darkness, however that is for us as individuals. Yeah.
Oh, this is so beautifully said. I've experienced so much energy moving through my body as you were speaking, because this is exactly it. There's a heading in this summit called Turning Pain into Purpose and Power. And this is really where I'm coming from. And it's amazing to witness again and again with each session that I'm having with these beautiful people here on the summit, that each and every one came from their own story of pain and abuse, and different colors, different shapes, different stories, but essentially all the same. And moving through that and finding the keys that are actually the gems that we collect along the way, because in every darkness, in every night dark of the soul, in every horrific experience, there is always some kind of a blessing in disguise, some kind of a teaching, of a lesson that will be for the greatest good of humanity, if we know how to alchemize it, if we know how to see it and turn it. And
absolutely. That's the key, isn't it? But sometimes that's the little bit that we don't quite get to, that alchemy or that lifting into a higher place. And that's often, I think, when we need some kind of help. But help can come in the form of reading a book that helps you realize you're not alone, that someone else has gone through this, you know, situation that's so similar to mine, or maybe it's speaking to someone, or maybe it's, you know, sharing the journey like we are now in the summit. It can come in different ways, but ideally, if we seek out some kind of guidance, some kind of help, it can elevate us to that point where we feel a little bit stronger, a little bit clearer with what happened, a little bit more at peace or at ease. And it's just those tiny baby steps that we have to take, because it isn't necessarily, or for all of us, a leap of this realization, you know, that, oh, look, I'm cured. It doesn't often happen like that. It's not some kind of instantaneous awakening for most of us. It's a process. But there are ways, and like we said before, in the world that we're in now, the beauty of this technological era, this connectivity that we have, we are more than ever in a position of power in that connection, and resources are available at the click of a button. So we don't ever have to feel alone, even if we don't necessarily want to reach out to someone. There are some things, resources and ways that we can help ourselves. Because if we help ourselves, sometimes it's the first stage of our healing, of our recovery, of our processing through the trauma that we've experienced.
Right. And we don't need to go through that journey alone. We can find that friend or a professional guide or somebody to take our hand and walk with us when it's really, really challenging. So we really don't have to be there alone. And reaching out for help is not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength. It's realize, I need help now. Can you please help me?
That's when that courage of the heart comes into it, because to put your hand up, to reach out, to speak up is tremendously courageous. And I encourage anyone who's going through a challenging or a dark night of the soul, what you said, or a period of their life where trauma has happened or has come up, or you're in it right now, to find someone that you can trust, who you can rely on, who has the ability to hold you in this space. And that might be a dear friend, it might be your beloved, you know, partner, it might be a family member, it might be a professional. But I do urge, you know, those who are seeking professional guidance to make sure you have a rapport with the practitioner, because different practitioners have different ways of doing things, and there's lots of people out there. Some of them know their stuff, some of them don't, and not everyone has the ability to help you through trauma and grief. It's big work, and you need someone who can meet you where you are and to hold you in a safe space. And that doesn't necessarily mean physically hold you. It can be in a space of energetic holding where you feel seen and heard and loved and cherished as a human being, as a soul, as a woman. So do your research, make sure you feel comfortable with the person that you seek help with if it is a professional. I just say that because we all have different stories and there's many different kind of ways of approaching these things. So use your discernment, make wise choices, and find the person who's right for you to guide you on this journey.
Right. And really listen to your gut feeling about that person. And, if it resonates, if you feel that connection, then yes, go for it. But if something is alarming, then listen to your body, listen to your gut. It knows what true for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Because there are also a lot of people that I would say maybe still using their trauma and their pain as a guiding force. So in other words, especially in the spirituality world, I've mentioned it in a couple of other sessions that in this day, a lot of, especially men, as sexuality leaders have been falling from their pedestal and being reported for misconduct and abuse, and it looks like they being in, maybe they understood it in their mind, maybe there was a sense of good intent there. I'm not saying that it wasn't, but there was also playing out their own fantasies or personality, ego, however you want to call it, and that can lead to more confusion and more harm. And
yeah, agreed. And I've seen that as well. And I can honestly say I've seen that as women also who are in positions of power. And we see this a lot in, the spiritual or the Western Tantra, where it's all about sex, when Tantra isn't all about sex, and these kind of circles where people are abusing their power and they're looked up to by their students or clients, and unfortunately they don't have boundaries. And that's one thing that we all need to have. We need to have boundaries as practitioners. We need to have boundaries as just sovereign beings to know that's not okay with me. And I actually recently helped some clients through this, those who have been training and studying in different places in the world, and their teachers have been overstepping the boundaries. And that's not okay. And especially if you've already gone through trauma, and you need someone who can hold that space, who you can look up to, get the teachings and the wisdom from, and who knows that you are respected and honoured as a student, and we don't cross that boundary. Practitioners or, teacher, student, it's a very sacred relationship, and it's not supposed to be sexualized, and you're not supposed to be, someone's fantasy brought to life. You're there to learn and to be looked after and respected and held in a safe space. So, yeah, like we've said, be aware of that. And I just wanted to add that because there's women out there who I know who are doing it too. So don't just think because it's a woman that she won't try as well. Be aware, right? There's men and there's women out there, doesn't matter how they identify, who are crossing these boundaries, and many of them are actually causing more harm than good. And this harm can be extreme, from psychological breakdowns to you name it. I've seen all different experiences. I've had people come to me after they've been traumatized by some of these practitioners. So it really comes down to our discernment and being comfortable in our choice, and knowing that we're training or working with or getting guidance from someone who has integrity, who has honesty, and who walks their walk and talks their talk. If a teacher is like partying at nighttime or getting high or having promiscuous sex, and you've heard they have relationships with their clients or their students, and then they're sitting down sharing beautiful wisdom teachings during the day, okay, maybe they have some wisdom, maybe their heart's in the right place when they're in that moment. But if they're doing all that stuff at the same time, that's not spiritual, that is not true, that is not honest, it's not conscious, it's none of those things, and that's not a position of a leader or a teacher. So keep that in mind, and make sure if you're choosing to work with someone or do a retreat or anything like that, any kind of healing process or training, that you know who you're working with to the best of your ability. Do your research beforehand is what I'm saying.
Yeah, very important, yes. And yeah, before we wrap up this beautiful conversation, I know that you have a beautiful gift to share with the audience. Would you like to share what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. After everything we've kind of spoken about with alignment, it is so in alignment. Funny that. It's a soul alignment meditation that is really ideal to do in the morning, either as your morning practice or some kind of ritual, the way to start your day, or perhaps after you've had your meditation time or your journaling time. And it just helps you in a very simple, easy to use way to align that physical, emotional, and mental bodies that we spoke about, so you are in a better place to receive that highest version of you, that consciousness, that soul, to work through your mind, to work through your emotions, and to work through your body. So that's my gift, the soul alignment meditation. And I feel it would be really helpful and just so simple to weave into whatever you've got going on. It only takes a few minutes, but it definitely can have a beautiful, powerful impact on how your day unfolds after that.
Wow, beautiful. So grab that opportunity. It sounds absolutely wow. So thank you so much for that. And please tell us if people wants to make some contact with you and work with you directly, how can they find you?
Sure. The best way to connect with me is from my website, which is stellamuse.com, and that's Stella with an A. You can access free videos. I've got a free ebook up there called The 10 Veils, which is a beautiful resource, especially for women, because it actually goes into the underworld, the feminine journey of dealing with our darkness, our trauma, our shadows, and it's pretty comprehensive. There's a bit of a worksheet here and there in there. They're going to get you to think and sit with yourself and go within, but it's a very powerful tool. It's free. I've got lots of articles up there as well. And then also my podcast, which is Sacred Guidance with Stella Muse. And you can access that on any podcast platform as well.
Wow. So yeah, definitely go and check that out. Thank you so much for your graceful beauty and wisdom shared. I really appreciate you and your work, and thank you for being a co-creator of light and consciousness.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you, beautiful lady. Thank you for all you're bringing to this world and for bringing us together in this summit. And I sincerely trust all the lovely ladies who are tuning in take a few gems from what we've shared today about conscious choices and discernment, and about working on our habits and patterns that don't serve us physically, emotionally, mentally, and understand we're all on this journey together and you don't have to do it alone. And there's people like you and I who are here to work with people one-on-one as well, and help you navigate those dark times, that you can get back into the light and then share that light that is you with the world, however that looks in your unique way. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Blessings on your way.